So I wanted to make a video about the last year of my life, 2025, and the things that I've learned, like the most pressing experiences that I've had, and share that with you. And this past year, 2025, was the greatest year of my life. I don't know how else to say that. I've had some exceptional years, and my life has definitely been on an uphill trajectory in profound ways in the past. But like sometimes I like to think in frames of like peak weeks. Like if I could measure these exceptional correlations that represent me achieving new levels or having another moment of success, either like financially or physically or in some area of my life, like in my writing practice or in sobriety or relationally. And I like to mark them as like sometimes as a correspondence and like a number of different things sort of emerge in 1 week or in this case 1 year. I mean, like this entire year, I don't know how else to say it. It's been a peak year for Adam Hudson. And I'm so excited to just share a few things with you about what I learned. So let's jump into it. This year has, I'll just hit a couple on the highlights. I was married this year. So I've never been married before. I am 45 years old. So I have had a long trajectory of utter failures in relationships. And that's just been part of my story. And I've had amazing relationships, deep loving relationships, but that have inevitably unraveled and sort of dissipated, and they've needed to conclude. And I've learned a lot. I don't really have much resentment about former relationships. You'll hear people like, but um, there's an immense amount of gratitude for the things that I've learned and experiences that I've had. But, it's never been a long term sustainable in a sustainable way until this year. And I married the love of my life. And it's just been a transformational process to become the person that is available for that. And I heard this amazing quote yesterday. I did a little brief short on it that show me your partner, and I'll tell you how much you love yourself. Like you can measure the degree of self love by looking at your partner, by the partner that you end up attracting, end up mirroring in cases. And I have just been utterly, phenomenally blessed. And so that's been a profound growth area for me. And there were times in terms of I hit multiple bottoms in my relationship to women, in my relationship to the practice of intimacy, the practice of developing a relationship. And each, like the devastating, incomprehensible lows, depressions that were a part of that grief and fundamental disbelief about the whole arena, that there would ever be a partner that would that would deal with my unique flamboyance and crazy and um, character. And yet here it is. It's just been it's been the emergence of a type of character, a personality that is worthy of that next stage of life. Um, and so just that, right? Getting married this year. And then the other thing was leaving a teaching career of 13 plus years. I had been a professional educator, and I embarked on um, going into my business full time. I've been working as a life coach, sober coach, um, for multiple years, but I've never really gone all in a way, because I was always just deeply afraid to let go of the stability, the social economy, the social confidence that came from personal confidence and financial stability, institutional, like authority even in society. that came from being a secondary education professional, teaching in the middle school, high school. I even worked in the elementary at different times, and just this deep love for kids and the love for the industry of education as a whole. But it became like um, a yoke, like a heavy spiritual burden under the weight of unrealized potential in ways that I was spiritually on a soul level accountable for. And one of the most profound lessons that I've learned this year is how that what it feels like to risk. Like in my own personal life and the lives of like so many others, there are these emotional states which are rarely experienced. And it was almost like, how about risking the emotional state that's so rarely experienced to gain experience with the emotional state that goes along with risk? And knowing that, there's this there's real consequences to risk. And I think at heart, the lesson around risk that I've felt is that um, it's been fundamentally a development of faith. And I think I say faith because I remember, like, I've got 14 years sober, and I remember what it was like having to risk leaving behind massive dreams, parts of myself, identity, relationships, connections with institutions, having to leave my entire life behind in order to get sober, in order for the rearrangement of my character to unfold so that I could begin a healing process. And know, like, becoming familiar with the pain that it takes to risk leaving all that behind, because that when in my case, because I couldn't get sober, I was continually self-sabotaging, and I was looking at the end of a life worth living. And it's interesting that in leaving my work, over becoming an educator, growing professionally, and then feeling the conclusion of that professional path for multiple years, the idea of risking leaving that path was untenable. It was just there was too much psychic weight, hesitancy, self-doubt, uncertainty that would just come on me, become saturated, and there was no possibility of me leaving. There was just too much risk. I just didn't believe in myself in a way to support myself financially, to support myself sort of in a professional, disciplined way to build my own business. It took years of developing capacity, internal capacity, to develop the skills, the techniques, the strategies for discipline in order to have enough confidence to build my own business. But primarily, like, I had to risk. I had to risk this year, and remember that these unexplored emotional states that come along with risk are some of the most creative, generative, some of the most evolutionarily, like, productive emotional states. And I was never giving myself access to them, right? I can never get access to them because I was staying in my comfort zone professionally. And interestingly enough, that professional path ended up becoming almost in a real way categorically codependent, because it was sort of like, it's fascinating when you really look at, quote unquote, your most stable industries these days. So many people relinquish their authority, their identity, their sense of autonomy, completely over to an industry. And this is what I did. Like, well, like, you're going to have, you pay me, you give me my sense of identity, you give me my sense of authority, you give me my sense of purpose, and I'm going to exchange all that. I'm going to give you all that in exchange for stability, security, and a feeling of safety, of consistency, financially and professionally. Yet in the end, there is a limit and a sacrifice that requires. And and the sacrifice is never getting access to parts of my character and latent spiritual potential that will never be realized. And I think that's primarily what this whole chapter of my life has been in terms of my marriage and in terms of how I'm conducting myself financially. So it's a profound risk. Through that risk is just this immense experience of faith. Again, faith that I haven't, the depth of faith, the dependency upon God and upon faith in a way that I haven't felt since when I got sober, when I was just like, my life was burnt to the ground and here I go. God, you're going to have to take care of all of my stuff. And it's just this amazing God dependency that becomes front and center again in order to awaken new skills, new potentiality, new forms of character and identity in order to live into a future potential of service, of greater magnification of service. And so that's one of the most profound lessons and like practices that I've been entering into, experiencing these unexplored emotional states that come along as a product and benefit from the risk, from the faith. But interestingly enough, there's also the shadow of that, which has been fear, anxiety. I've had abdominal pain that I've had to navigate. And it's interesting that like this year is the first year that continuing to practice frameworks of sobriety have reintroduced me to hard, and even developing and growing into a business and committing to matrimony in a way, it's a covenant, not only with her but with God, with my Creator. It's one of the sacraments, holy sacrament of marriage, and there's an immense amount of power in that. And it's been a fundamental reminder that hard work feels hard. That's literally it. It's interesting. I dabble in different domains of feeling, right? Getting connected back to that emotional state of hard. And so hard is like a measured emotional state of fight or flight. Like that's when it's hard. Like when you have a sensation of welling up of an emotional state of like fight or fly, that's what's called hard. You're in a hard scenario, and the work is to remain present and hospitable, or being a host to the pain of difficulty, the pain of it being hard, and admitting like through faith that like this is probably not going to kill me. The feeling of it being hard. Yes, I do metabolize that because we know the mind and body are absolutely connected. Like my neurochemistry is navigating and metabolizing, my physical body is metabolizing that experience, that emotional state of hard, but recognizing that like that's through that manufactured adversity, I get access to new frames of character, like new muscles that are built because it is metabolized into new capacity. And professionally, that's what I've been working with, right? Like, what does it feel like to do hard work? I know what it feels like to do physical hard work. I've always been very much somatically oriented, like in my body, lifting weights, my athleticism. I just played a soccer game last night, and I feel it today. I'm a little sore. I'm a 45-year-old playing against, young people, young athletes. And I'm now one of the oldest on the court. I feel it. And the heart of recovery, but also taking that domain and translating it into the hard of building my business, the hard of feeling the self-pity, the doubt, the sort of the overwhelming, even guilt about like being disoriented in the world. All those things come along with the risk and the building of new capacity, and that's like why it's hard. And so this year has been, and interestingly enough, one of the most joyous, truly connected and fulfilling years of my life. And it's also been hard. um, and I think the last thing that I want to say is just 2025. As I was reviewing the year, and I always review my year, I have a whole template that I guide my clients through, and I do every single year. And looking back at it, like my sobriety was my first, it was my first lesson in becoming an adult and truly understanding that in order to give, in order to receive, I must give. In order to grow, I must risk. In order to enlarge myself, I must have faith and be humbled. It's truly been a deepening of this spiritual path of sobriety. And I still understand my sobriety, my walk in the 12-step world, how much I owe to that. I think I'll spend the rest of my life. I don't think I will spend the rest of my life paying back the debt that my teachers, my sponsors, all that has been given to me. And I think so much of that rests on the spiritual condition of my sobriety, because it has been a path forward. I think it's a path for society at large, a frame through which we can understand a healing line in order to build a new society, to reconstitute things like restoration, redemption, things like healing on a social level within our institutions and self. I think, to some extent, I've had to leave the educational institution in order to speak to it. I think that's a living prayer that I have, is that 2026 might be an opportunity to sort of begin a more public ministry, if you will, a more public facing exercise in the gift of sobriety. So sobriety still is my spiritual path. So, just this year, this profound shifts in my own character, in my own identity, professionally, relationally, getting married, leaving my job, beginning to build my business. And so I just pray that you do some reflection about your 2025. I'm happy to help you if you want to reach out. I do coaching around this, but that also that you plan and envision your 2026 so that you can create concrete benchmarks that you can then use as a guide, as a light, a line through to profound living, to your ability to be of maximum service to God and God's kids. So if you've listened this far, may God bless you. And if you haven't heard it yet today, you are loved.